Well, firstly, I want to say I'm really sorry that happened to you. Um, and I kind of want to then ask, what should the importance of testing be? How can we then use assessment? The title of our forum is How Can We Reimagine Assessment to a way that better serves our communities, that better serves our students, and accurately kind of helps educators and students alike to do their jobs. Anyone who'd like to speak, welcome to. Thank you.
I can go. I think that when we think about assessment, it's really important to go back to the core of what was it designed to assess. And so, man, that was a lot of ACT. I think that I'll just use ACT as an example. So I remember how stressful it is as a junior, as a senior in college, taking the ACTs and knowing like what high stakes this test was. Um, but when I think about it, it's supposed to test the how ready a student is for college, right? And so when I think about Macalester and other schools not using ACT or SAT as a way to look at a student, I'm thinking about what are other things that they are looking at when choosing if they're going to be admitting a student or not. Like, I actually look at my admissions files when I was at Macalester. I was doing research at the U of M, and I saw exactly what they used when they decided to admit me and not, right? So it's very much things that are still based and steeped in whiteness. And so I think that that's something that worries me. I'm wondering, like, what would it look like if we kept ACT as a data point, but we understood that it is just one data point of a student, who they are. And what if we admitted students that didn't score that well, but we knowing that coming in, already knowing how to support the student as they come in. Sorry, my mind is like jumbling, but I think that it is important to remind ourselves what is the point and the appropriate uses of the data that we get from the assessment.
Yeah, I'll jump back in briefly here. I think also kind of going off of like what you said is I think a way to use standardized testing specifically as more in a positive importance is when you get those test scores, asking yourself both why they may be exceptionally good or why they may be exceptionally bad, instead of just kind of taking that for like that face value. So it's like when you get a very good test score, what resources or things did the student or person do to achieve this very high test score, or and vice versa, in the sense being, if you get a very low test score, like asking what factors may have played a role in this, and kind of just and taking more of a holistic approach to it in both lights, and being able to dive a little deeper in understanding why a student's testing the way they are.
So I think I'm biased because I've heard Malachi and Atquetzali like speak in classrooms, and they are brilliant. And I hate the fact that they're sitting here trying to justify certain numbers on ACT scores. Okay, that's for one. That's just my personal truth. And so I'm sorry about your experience, Malachi and Atquetzali. But I also think about a conversation that I know Gao and I, because we are the assessment research evaluation department, is a department of two. And I know that in our system, there was a history of using MAP scores and MCA scores to then suggest that certain students should then register for certain classes, right? And when this information came to our department, Gao and I talked about it, and we were like, this is crazy. Like, why? And so, for example, fifth grade moving into sixth grade, why would you use fourth grade MCA standards to determine how well a fifth grade student would do in a sixth grade classroom? To me, and so, digging into it, we had really well-intentioned people that were trying to give parents information about what classes to sign up for. So they thought, hey, this would be a quick data point. Let's just do this. Let's send this out. This is a history of testing. And my response personally was, that's just lazy. Like, that is just a really lazy, quick way to try to do something and to standardize a process, which isn't right. And so I think about, if there was an authentic way to determine college readiness, going back to ACT testing, right? What ACT testing is supposed to do is to measure a student's readiness for post-secondary. Well, there are other ways to do that, but they're not as fast as a standardized test. That's just my truth. If we really wanted to take every student seriously and be able to sit down and talk to the student and see what they're curious about, why they want to attend Macalester, what is it that they want to study, what moves them, what's their passion, what's going to drive them to be a successful student at Macalester, that would be an authentic way to assess college readiness in my eyes, and not a data point where we have to figure out, how do I raise 2 more points when we're talking about brilliant kids who sit in a classroom and really think critically. And for me, as an adult who's been in their space, they've pushed my own thinking. So
yeah, I can kind of build off of that. We've done research at the Macalester level, and then, nationwide, there's research that shows that, like, the best indicator of how a student is going to do in college is how they did in high school. Like, it's pretty direct and it's pretty obvious. And so, that in itself, I think, is all you need to really say, like, that is a much better measure or a much better data point to look at than the testing piece. To Gao's point, though, like, even if you're looking at a single data point, like, there's, like, all of that is fraught with, white supremacy, and the fact that it privileges folks for whom that schooling scenario or for whom that test was built. And so, we at Macalester have a holistic review process where we're trying to take into account not only, like, how well did you do in school, but, like, what are your teachers saying about you? If you work with a community-based organization, what are your advisors saying about you? Like, that really matters. And, as much as possible, it's a way of trying to create as equitable of a process as possible, while still acknowledging that, like, we are still using data points that aren't perfect and that are going to be fraught, like I said, with privileging students that are typically white and that are typically higher income, and finding a way to break that down sort of within our process it's an ongoing conversation for sure. And again, just to go back to the recent decision to go test optional, part of our hesitation there was that understanding that the test is one data point amongst many might actually help things out. So I'm talking a lot, but just really quick, the history of the SAT and the ACT is a really interesting one. It was established on pretty blatantly racist standards from the very beginning. So in the 1920s, some of the Ivy League schools were seeing that a lot of non-white students were getting in, and the leadership of some of those schools didn't like that. And so they were looking for a way to limit the numbers of non-white students entering, specifically Jewish students, but also African-American students, Hispanic students. And so they created this test. And an interesting thing happened in that that actually provided a way for more students of color, for more Jewish students to actually get into some of these schools. And so a second step was to implement the admissions interview so that these schools could take a look at the students who were applying and obviously not notate their race, but that would then be part of the application process. I work in admissions. I have to grapple with the fact that, like, these two tools, which when used well can be a positive thing, were created for a very specific purpose, which was basically a blatantly racist policy to keep, again, non-white students out of those institutions. So it's a thing that we need in my line of work to constantly remind ourselves of, and to do what we can to be holistic, to do what Silvy was talking about, to like look at what kind of a critical thinker you are, not based off of your test score, but off of, you know, what you bring to the table in other ways.